Good evening and welcome to the July 20th, 2022 meeting of the Lower Merion Board of Commissioners. Now before we start, I'd like to ask you to silence your cell phones, please. If you need equipment for the hearing impaired, that is up here at the front. And with that, will the July 2022 meeting of the Board of Commissioners of the Township of Lower Merion please come to order, and please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Jody, we have an echo from somewhere?
I believe that may have been Commissioner O'Neill.
Okay.
Who I thought would be excused, but I think she must just be joining us audio.
Okay, thank you. Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Thank you.
And we'll try and do like one name.
Mr. Bernheim.
Okay.
Present.
Mr. Churchill.
Here.
Mr. Corky.
Here.
Excuse me for 1 second while I mute people. Mr. Gavin.
Present.
Mr. Grimes.
Here.
Ms. S. Kramer. Here. Ms. G. Kramer.
Here.
Mr. McComb.
Here.
Mr. McKeon.
Here.
Ms. O'Neill. She is here. Mr. Stevenson.
Present.
Mr. Whalen.
Here.
Mr. Zellow.
Here.
Mr. Sinai.
Here.
Mr. President, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. I'd like to move for the approval of the minutes of a stated meeting of the Board of Commissioners held on June 15th, 2022, as distributed. Thank you, Vice President Gavin. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. So now we get to do something that is a delight to do when we have the opportunity, which is to thank some of the people who have served on behalf of Lower Merion Township in the past. I think what I'll do is we'll all just go up here to the Oval. If I can ask Mr. Davis and Ms. Elkis, Mr. Howland, and Commissioner Whalen, come on up to the Oval. So by way of explanation, in this township, in addition to the Board of Commissioners, we have a number of advisory boards that are comprised of residents who also serve sort of tirelessly and generally thanklessly on behalf of the township and don't even have the glamour of being on TV, on local TV. But their service is invaluable. And so tonight we are happy to recognize a number of people who have served in those functions in the township in previous years. And we gather them together every once in a while to do something like this. I'm going to introduce each of them, say what their service was, and then Vice President Gavin will have a little gift, a token of appreciation for you, but it's not nearly enough to compensating you for all the time that you put in. So first we have Ken Davis, who served on the Cable Television Advisory Board from May 2014 until May 2020. He was also the chair of that board, and he also served as a commissioner of Ward 2. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We have Patty Elkis, who served on the Shade Tree Commission from May 2010 through June 2020. And thank you very much for your service. Charlie Howland was on the Planning Commission from January 2004 until August 2018, and you can do that math. He also serves as a chair, and thank you very much. There was a Planning Commission that did a lot of tremendous work. So thank you. And Sean Whalen served on the Planning Commission. Okay. On the Planning Commission from July 2017 until January 2020, and now serves as the Commissioner for Ward 7. Thank you. So I also want to acknowledge several people who also served for the township and are unable to attend in person. Philip Ivory was on the Historical Architectural Review Board. He served from 2010 through 2020. Susan Nolte was on the Health Advisory Council from 2014 until 2019. And Michael Robbins on the Zoning Hearing Board as an alternate from 2010 until 2015, and as a member from 2015 until 2022. Please join me in thanking them as well. Thank you again for your service. Oh, we do have pictures that we all need to do. So, okay. Yeah.
3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 0. And bigger smile, bigger smile. Happy to be there. We go.
Okay, thank you. Again, thank you very much. July 6th, July 13th, and again earlier this evening, to receive reports from its professional staff regarding legal matters, personnel matters, the Lower Merion School District, coronavirus, an equipment upgrade for this room, the Pension Advisory Board, and for 1400 Mill Creek Road. There will be a stated meeting of the Board of Commissioners for August. That will be held on Monday, August 1st, 2022 at 7 p.m. Instead of our usual Wednesdays, because it's our August meeting. The Board of Commissioners will be in recess from August 2, 2022 until September 7th, 2022. And also, National Night Out will be held on Tuesday, August 9th, 2022 from 6 to 9 p.m. in the parking lot of the Wynwood Shopping Center. So the next section of our agenda is public privilege of the floor, but before we do that, I'm going to do something a little out of the ordinary for a board meeting, and that is to say a few words here at the start of the meeting. Now, we don't usually do this, but so many residents have reached out to the township and their commissioners about establishments with federal firearms licenses, and in particular the Shot Tech establishment that recently relocated to Bell Avenue. And so many are here tonight, or watching on TV or online, that I thought it would be worthwhile to update you at this point in the meeting about the township's process. We will still have public privilege, so soon you will have the opportunity to address the board if you want. And like always, my colleagues after public privilege and I will have the opportunity to respond. But first I want to acknowledge some of my colleagues. Commissioners Dave McComb, who's up there, Commissioner Gilda Kramer, Commissioner Mike McKeon. Whether out in public or behind the scenes, all three of those commissioners have been working tirelessly on this issue. They certainly have my heartfelt gratitude, and I'm sure that's shared by my board colleagues and the entire Lower Merion community. Anyway, over the last couple of weeks, we've heard concerns from the community about guns in general and the location of Shot Tech in particular. You've told us you're worried about community safety. You're concerned that establishments like Shot Tech might promote unsafe gun culture, and that you would prefer stores that are more in keeping with community values. And of course, all of these concerns are amplified given the recent tragic episodes of gun violence in this country. I completely get it. Indeed, the primary mission of local government is to promote the health, safety, and welfare of its residents. And I can say without hesitation that Lower Merion Township always has, and I believe always will, make that its #1 priority. To that end, we are carefully evaluating what options the township has with respect to firearms and ammunition, such as manufacture, sales, transfer, or location, to the extent permitted by law. And let me be precise about what I mean by that. First, the Board of Commissioners is a legislative body, meaning that we pass laws that apply to the township. So we are looking at what legislation we could consider enacting. However, and this is an important caveat, the township is rather limited in what it can do. Our authority is superseded by state and federal laws, and so there are many things that even if this board and this community wants to do, we do not have the authority to do. Now, figuring out the exact parameters of what our ordinances legally can or cannot say takes work, and that's the stage that we're at. It involves working with the township solicitor, reading ordinances, and drafting legislation for the board to consider. Now, let me be clear, I do not raise these caveats to suggest that we shouldn't try as hard as possible to address the community's concerns. I personally believe we absolutely should. Rather, I am just trying to be forthright about the hand we've been dealt. It is not successful to pass firearms legislation without paying attention to legal constraints. For example, some years ago, Lower Merion tried to enact an ordinance forbidding guns in township parks. That ordinance was struck down in court because it was specifically preempted by Commonwealth of Pennsylvania law. To avoid that kind of circumstance, we need to tread carefully and follow a thorough legislative process. Now, as for Shot Tech in particular, I won't get too much into the specifics of its business model, other than to note that it has already been operating at a different location in Ballackinwood for some years, and that the owner says it does not carry ammunition at the shop or an inventory of firearms for sale there. It is a use that is allowed under our current commercial zoning, and our solicitor confirms that it would not be able to be retroactively disallowed with a future zoning change. Okay, so to wrap up, we hear your concerns. Our legislative options are going to be limited by state and federal laws, and we are working on doing what we can. So that's where we are. Okay, so with that, it is now time for public privilege of the floor. And so this is a section of the meeting where any members of the public may address the board on any non-agenda items or any other public matters in which the township has an interest, jurisdiction or authority, I should say. We ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Our township secretary has a timer. I would ask if you hear the beep go off, you conclude your statement without me having to ask you to do that. If there is a group of people speaking on the same topic, and you have a spokesperson for the group, you ask for the spokesperson to speak on behalf of the group, and then you'll get 5 minutes. That's kind of how it works. We would ask that if what you were going to say had been said before, that you not feel the need to repeat it, because we would like to you work through the evening. But of course, we will hear everything that anyone wants to say. Okay. So with that, we will start with the people in the room, and then we will go to people online, and then we have people who submitted comments by email, and I'll turn to those after that. So if anyone in the room wishes to speak, we have a podium here. When you go to the podium, start by introducing yourself with your name and where you are from, and we'll take your comments.
Hi there. My name is Amelia Powell, and I'm a resident of Ward 9. I wrote the petition, Stop Firearm Sales Bala, on change.org. That petition has been signed by over 2,700 individuals in our community. It's been viewed over 40,000 times and shared over 1,000 times since I wrote it about 3 weeks ago. If that doesn't give you a good sense of the public sentiment, I'm not sure what else will. But for the purposes of the discussion this evening, I ask that the community take a common sense approach to the language used to describe this situation and look at the bigger picture, which is what is good for our community. I think it's important to note that this isn't a political issue. That said, I'd like to take a moment to clarify that the difference between a gun store and an FFL is pure semantics from a community perspective. The net result is the same. It's individuals walking through our community with weapons in a location that is facing not just a school crossing guard, but also a school bus stop. It's directly across the street from one of our community parks, the entrance to the Ballot Trail, and it's within a mile of several schools, 2 of our public schools, many grammar schools, elementary schools, etc. You've all heard that before. I'm not going to keep repeating that. This action, in and of itself, of people walking near children with weapons, is a thing that needs to be legislated better. It needs to be controlled by Lower Merion going forward. We need to make sure that we have better policies in place going forward. In 2021, Scientific American performed a study which looked at county-level data nationwide over a 17-year period. The results showed that when the number of gun dealerships within 100 miles of a given area went up, The number of gun homicides in that area also increased. I find it outrageous that there's no legislation on LM's books to curtail firearm businesses, but there's plenty of legislations to limit vape shops, pawn shops, and dispensaries. There's clearly a desire here to control the type of businesses that operate in our community, but there's nothing addressing the sale of weapons designed specifically to kill people. It just makes no sense. And frankly, I think it's reprehensible oversight on the part of our elected leadership. Saying that there is nothing that can be done is inaccurate and irresponsible on the behalf of our community leadership. Inaction on this issue presents a problem of monumental proportions that will very likely result in astronomical legal fees for this township. I ask that the Board of Commissioners listen closely to the sentiments of the community and consider some of the drafted legislation that the legal teams have put together, because this is an important problem that needs to be fixed quickly, dramatically, and yesterday, to be honest. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening, and thanks to the Board of Commissioners for the opportunity to share my thoughts about the presence of the Shot Tech store in Bala Avenue.
Sorry, excuse me.
My name-
Oh, sorry, you're getting
Yeah,
there. Okay.
Okay. My name is Maria Wells, and I have been a resident of Bala Cynwyd for 27 years. My husband and I have raised our family in this community, and our children have attended the Lower Merion Public Schools. In addition, I have been a public school teacher for 25 years, most recently as a fourth grade teacher, and I come to you today in that capacity. I am responsible for teaching the academic and social curriculum, but my real purpose as an educator is to keep my 9 and 10-year-old students safe and help them feel secure. Every year, my students and I practice something called an intruder drill, where we prepare for the unlikely event that an active shooter invades our school, and we cower silently in the back of the room with the door locked, and I try to reassure them that this will never happen. The safety of my students is my priority, not just their physical safety, but their sense of security in their school and in this community. The irony is that they return home from school with the crossing guard safely escorting them across the street, the bus letting them off, and then some of my students will walk past this gun store on the corner of Bala Avenue, Montgomery Avenue, potentially in full sight of individuals who have just purchased firearms. Talk about mixed messages. We drill to protect our children against gun violence and then expose them to the distribution of guns less than a mile from their school. This shop in a residential area with an easy walking distance to preschools, daycare centers, public, private schools, Bala Park, synagogues, churches, the Cynwyd Trail, are all places where children, our children, should feel secure and not be in the presence of firearms. As an educator, this makes me afraid for myself and for my students. We establish as a society all sorts of specific protections for school areas. Registered sex offenders are prohibited from living near a school. Speed limits are reduced at schools to prevent pedestrian accidents. Public access to our school buildings and grounds is controlled. These are natural, logical, and reasonable steps that our community takes to protect our children. It is not unreasonable to demand that we also reduce the unfettered distribution of guns near our schools. Teachers are constantly managing risk and are under intense emotional burdens these days, especially with the past 2 years of COVID. And so I am asking the Board of Commissioners, as representatives of our community, to support our children, our teachers, and our schools by not allowing a source of risk and threat to be purposely placed in our community. The day after the Uvalde, Texas shooting that targeted fourth grade students and teachers, I spoke to my fourth graders, and I reminded them that my most important responsibility is to keep them safe. This is a responsibility that we have as an entire community, and that is why I'm here tonight. Thank you for your time.
excuse me. So I go to Secretary. I'm going to ask that we not applaud at the end. You can nod in agreement. It's generally not a forum in which we applaud. And there's lots of good reasons for balance for that. And I think we know that you agree. But thank you. Yeah.
Good evening. My name is Joseph Oxman. I'm part of the group that Amelia Powell formed, Citizens Against Guns in gun stores in Bala. I'm an attorney. I was a solicitor for the Chester Stormwater Authority as well as a solicitor for the Chester Parking Authority. We have formed a legal team in terms of looking at this issue, and I'm passing to you a packet with 3 documents in it. The top document shows the certificate of occupancy that Mr. Schmidt, we believe, materially lied in attaining that certificate, in which he was stating that he was part of a business group B zoning to get his certificate of occupancy. I think what many of the commissioners don't understand is that under business group B, he is not allowed to sell anything, especially any sort of retail guns. He has said that all he is doing in his business is training, which is materially not true. In his website, as well as his Facebook page, he has made many posts in which he's talked about putting a showroom in his building in which he will display all the guns that he has for sale. Now, he's a federal firearms dealer, which means he's a kitchen table dealer. What I think many of the commissioners don't understand is that Lower Merion Township has been woefully neglect in having any firearms sales ordinances. There is a difference between possession of firearms and the sale of firearms. I know I sent to many of you the list, the directory from the ATF of all the firearms sales ordinances in the state of Pennsylvania. Lower Merion has none. On the last page of the packet, our legal team has put together a sample ordinance. What is missing, woefully missing, in Lower Merion Township is, number one, we don't have any ordinance that prevents anyone from selling guns at a flea market or any open air market. We do not have any ordinance that prevents someone who loses their gun or has their gun stolen being mandatorily required to report that to the Lower Merion Police Department. We have no home occupation prohibition against kitchen table dealers. As of now, anybody can get a federal firearms license in Lower Merion and sell guns out of their house. There are over 100 municipalities within Lower Merion Township that prevent this. I'll just add one more thing. The last part of the sample is a sample zoning ordinance that could easily be implemented here in Lower Merion Township that would prevent anyone from selling any guns anywhere except in an industrial area. That is what Philadelphia does, that's what Abington Township does, that's what Springfield Township does, many of the townships around us. And I hope you will consider this, and I hope that Mr. Hugh will seriously consider this, because there is a difference between laws that prevent possession and those that prevent sales. Thank you.
Thank you. Again. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, I mean, please. So again, with the applause, I'm just going to ask you to hold it. Thank you.
Hi,
Sure,
good
please
evening,
go ahead.
everybody. My name is Bill Timms. I live on Henley Road. I've been a resident of Penwyn since 1991. My children have gone through school here. It's a wonderful place to live. We're very happy to be residents. Mr. Sinai, I think you said the tee up to this issue tonight was, I think you're saying, to a certain extent, legally our hands may be tied because of the fact that guns are available for sale, and that's the law. What I would ask you to consider then, as you also said, this is a legislative body, what I would ask you to do is if you think to craft legislation, then perhaps what you do is come at this from the other side, which might be reasonable, meaning that if indeed this gun shop is able to transact business, then perhaps you layer in outcomes and consequences to that gun shop owner for the misuse of any guns that take place, therefore potentially putting a significant chilling effect on his interest or their interest in doing business in that way. Perhaps that's a better way to approach this. I just ask that you think through and perhaps be creative and be bold. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Heather Exley. I have been a teacher in a private school for 30 years in an elementary school. I am a resident of Bala Cynwyd, and I'm the owner of Sky Soup Art Center on Bala Avenue. I've been there for 5 years. Parents come into my store and ask me, what can I do to keep their children safe? And I've always been able to give them things that I do to keep them safe. It makes it much more difficult to do that now with the gun store across the street. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Stacy Callum, and I am a pediatrician who works in public health. I'm also a resident of Marion Station and a mother of a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old who attend a child care facility within blocks of Shot Tech. So I want to share with you all today my worst day as a pediatrician. So I was in my first year of residency. I was working a Saturday morning shift in the pediatric ER when the overhead speaker announced, 9-year-old gunshot wound coming to the trauma bay. We all rushed to the trauma bay, our patient arrived, and we quickly got to work. Our team of doctors and nurses did everything we could to save our young patient. We drilled holes into her bones to give her faster IV access. We performed CPR, gave her blood transfusions, and even as a last-ditch sort of Hail Mary effort, we cracked open her chest in the trauma bay to try to actually manually pump her heart. But it was of no use. She died. So I wasn't the one who had the job of telling the family that she died, but I can tell you that the gut-wrenching cries I heard from her family members when they found out she had passed, like right now today, 10 years later, still give me chills. These are cries that no parent should ever have to make. And I can't remember when, but at some point that day, we found out that our patient was actually accidentally shot in her own home by a 2-year-old family member. So not only did a young girl lose her life that day, but that toddler's life was also forever changed because he had unintentionally killed a loved one. Can you imagine growing up with that type of guilt and trauma? And sadly, this is not an isolated story. Guns are currently the leading cause of death of kids 1 to 19 in the US. And these are deaths from homicides, including mass shootings, suicides, or unintentional injuries like my patient. So some people may argue that in order to protect ourselves from perpetrators of gun violence, we all need to arm ourselves with guns, that the answer is we need more guns. But you know what? That's not supported by public health research. Having a gun in the home makes the likelihood of homicide 3 times higher, suicide 3 to 5 times higher, an accidental death like that of my patient 4 times higher. And from a policy level, there was a recent study published in the BMJ Journal which analyzed gun laws in all 50 states and found that states with more permissive gun laws and greater gun ownership had significantly higher rates of mass shooting. So if we want to protect ourselves and our loved ones from gun violence, we need fewer, not more guns in our community. And this brings me to the present. Having a firearm shop in our community, close to our schools, parks, houses of worship, puts us all at risk. And that day, when my 9-year-old patient died senselessly due to guns, we told her family we did everything we could. And it makes me wonder, if our elected officials, our commissioners, or the landlords of this commercial tenant were the ones who had to deliver the news of a child's death to a family, would they be able to say they did everything they could to protect that child? And that's my plea with you all tonight, to ask yourself that question, have you done everything you could? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Amanda Olson. I'm a resident of Bala Cynwyd. I'm wondering, before my time starts, can I play a video of, or do I need to say what?
Yeah, you're going to need to say it. We don't have a way for you to.
I mean, but can I play the audio?
Is
that fine?
If you want to play
Okay.
a pre-recorded audio, you're
Okay.
certainly welcome to.
I agree with everything that everyone has said before me. My name is Amanda Olson. I'm a resident of Bala Cynwyd for 11 years. I live around the corner from Shot Tech. When a mass shooting occurs, we often look at the shooter and we scroll through their Facebook and their Instagram, and we see all these red flags and we say, oh my gosh, we should have known. We should have known. I live in an area of Bala Cynwyd that's called Within the Arab. I have a lot of Orthodox Jewish neighbors. I've lived there for a long time, and I'm very close with a lot of them. Several of my neighbors have confided in me that Grant is not just some guy who likes guns, but he's someone who's actively wanting to put guns in the hands of our community members. So I thought of this, and I was been increasingly feeling less and less safe in my neighborhood for the first time in 11 years. So I thought I'd take a look at Grant's Instagram page, and I found some very disturbing photos, some videos, and opinions of the owner of Shot Tech. One video from December of 2021 starts with Grant stating that, quote, "It's time for Jews to get armed." He goes on to say, stop belly aching, stop wringing your hands, arm yourself, get trained, and be ready. Then he goes on to deliver a message that, for me, is like instilling, like he's using his religion as a cloak to instill hatred and fear into residents of Bala Cynwyd. And this is what he says. Let me rewind.
And lastly, I was blessed with a family that always reminded me that people hate you just for waking up Jewish this morning, just waking up alive with a beating heart this morning. And it's time that you recognize this in your life and not commit the same mistake, frankly, that your parents did, which is that you were raised on the pretenses that peace and love and harmony is normal. It's not normal. It takes a lot of hard work, and it's not the default. The default is that people hate you, and they hate you for no reason. They can't be talked to, they can't be reasoned with, you can't show them the facts. A small percentage can, and that's worthwhile. But a great deal, many people hate you, and it's time you start recognizing that, training, that way you're a cool cucumber throughout the year, and you'll set your kids up for success as well, and they won't be, oh my gosh, I'm so distraught, I'm so sad. They're just going to be an even keel throughout. It's much.
I encourage you all to look at his Instagram, read his comments, read his videos, listen to what he has to say. I know my time is up, but that's how important this is.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen. Who's next?
Hello, everyone. My name is Grant Schmidt. I'm the owner and lead instructor of Shot Tech LLC, located at 246 Bala Avenue. I've had great conversations with many of you in the past few weeks, and I'm grateful. There was a petition. Oh, yeah, sure. Thank you. Is this better? Yeah. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. There was a petition against my business and a call campaign based on wild misinformation, so I thought I would clear that up. First, here's what we are not. We are not a gun store. You cannot simply pop in or walk in. We are not Cabela's or Walmart, King Shooter Supply and King of Prussia, or DVSC in Philly, etc. We do not have a showroom of guns. That was a big deal for people. We have a showroom, sort of, but it's mostly like a props room. If someone sees guns on our walls from an Instagram post, those are training devices and training aids, no different than a martial arts studio would have those items to train in disarms. We don't sell full autos. We don't sell explosives. We are not a live fire range. If someone saw pictures from a live fire range, that's from private classes we do at a local range, not the ballot office. We did not just move into the community. We've actually been here for years as a training company. We went to people's homes and businesses, and we're a service to numerous local police departments. We have been in FFL in Bala Cynwyd for over a year. When some heard about us, they simply called, and I was happy to answer. Unfortunately, some ran with misunderstandings. Here's what we actually do. 1, personal training, education, and consultation utilizing an advanced simulator and multimedia space. Number 2, we do group training in the same fashion. Number 3, we are a by appointment only office that is an FFL. I would also like to mention that I run a nonprofit called Hazak. We teach key Jewish community members how to be armed and trained. Whether they want to be armed, that's their choice. But I, working armed security for many schools and houses of worship and stuff, recognize that us armed security people are not always there. But I can tell you certain people are always at these schools. So after a recent anti-Semitic attack in Colorado, we said, let's empower the key Jewish community members, the people like rabbis and such we know are going to be there. We do Stop the Bleed, we do first aid, etc. And then we also have the first ever Shabbat-friendly class where we're going to have 14 people inside that Eruv who are going to become armed security, which is very exciting. So what is an FFL? I'll answer that, but first, I think this great misunderstanding came about from a mistake I made with our website. Our website's landing page was our online store. You would then click on our Book Now button to schedule our services. The idea was that people would have to pass through our online store before coming to the website for their original intention, our services. I see now that that was a mistake simply because people thought our online store was indicative of our in-person office, which it is not. Someone mentioned that we should ban sales in the area. That would be fine with me. We just do the transfers, primarily. Shot Tech teaches people how to shoot and defend innocent life primarily by utilizing advanced simulation technology. In Pennsylvania, more than half of all households have at least one firearm. Lower Merion is no exception. USA is in its 35th consecutive month of record-breaking firearms transfers. It is estimated that we added 40 million firearms to the population legally last year. 16% of the Pennsylvania adult population has an active carry permit. Head down to the sheriff's office in Norristown Media or the permitting office in Philadelphia, and the lines often wrap around the hallways. So why is this happening? That's a question for another time, but the question I have asked is, where are people supposed to get training?
So Mr. Shea, I gave you some extra time because
Yes.
you had to do the mic at the beginning, but I need you to wrap it up.
Yes.
Okay.
So shouldn't training be accessible? Shouldn't it be positive, empowering, but serious and no nonsense? If you design a place that meets the needs of our community, we agree such a place should exist. It is Shot Tech with simulation training, and it is near consequence free learning environment. Thank you for your time. Happy to answer questions via email, messages, etc. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Paul DiLorenzo, and I've lived in the Bala Cynwyd area now for the best part of 20 years in the College Park section. So this particular issue is pretty close to home, literally and
Sir, could you
figuratively.
speak into the mic?
Sure.
It's a little hard to hear. Thank you very much.
In the time that I've lived here, I've also worked as a consultant to state and local governments all over the country. And part of my role is to help them in their assessment of their human service organizations, their social services, be able to help them not only improve but also enhance their relationship with their community and to make sure that the outcomes that they get are the best ones possible. When I moved to the township from Philadelphia, it seemed to me that this was a place where the planning was supposed to be quite good, where there was a good amount of coordination, where we were interested in preserving land, et cetera. And what I saw in the time I've been here, and my wife and I pay attention to all of the meetings, we try to attend as many as we can virtually, is just one example another of poor decision-making. And if I was hired as a consultant for a township like this, and you asked me to kind of summarize how we've handled development, these kinds of openings in a community, the ability of people to just keep building apartments and doing all kinds of things, instead what we get is a lot of empathy from the board here, but not real action. I would say we've given up and we've given in. And this gun shop, call it what you want, that's what it is. This is another example of you all giving up and giving in. So empathy's great, chairperson, but you know what? At the end of the day, the shop is still there. Thank you.
Thank you. Joseph Abramson, Bala Cynwyd. So first, I
just want to, I guess, remind the board that when when you said that you will listen to your solicitor regarding ordinances and everything, you really do that, because the last time you didn't listen to your solicitor, it cost taxpayers over $100,000, something which your insurance did not cover because you enacted an illegal ordinance. That's the first thing. The second thing I just want, it's really interesting that based on what I'm seeing, it's a shocking divergence from when Lower Merion had a gun shop in Ardmore. I have never seen such a group here come out, but I guess it's Ward 9. It's, you know, the eastern part of Lower Merion. In Ardmore, you know, if there's a gun shop there, nobody cares because it's not their community. But I do want to mention, you know, listening to a lot of the lies that are being spoken about, I just want to mention facts. You know, there's a lot of legalese regarding firearms, and apparently even attorneys don't know it. But let's just mention facts. You can buy a gun at an FFL anywhere in Pennsylvania, whether it's Philadelphia or Lower Merion. It's the exact same gun laws. How many homicides has Lower Merion had in the past few years? You can put it on one hand. How many homicides has Philadelphia had? As of today, it's over 300. So let's not pretend that it's the gun store. Because if you ask the police in Philadelphia how many guns were purchased illegally in Philadelphia that committed the homicide, those homicides, I doubt it would be a majority or even a significant number of those 300. Finally, or not finally, but continuing, this is a gun shop that's not a gun shop. It's a training simulator on Bala Avenue. Bala Avenue is empty. There's no retail there. Any retail that comes up fails. If Bala Cynwyd had if even a hot yoga shop could fail in Bala Cynwyd, you know, if someone is willing to put money up, you know, then it's worth it to do. You know, if people don't shop there, his business is going to fail. But, you know, we shouldn't be denigrating someone, as we heard before, about how horrible he is, and what's this store doing, what this shop is doing. You know, everyone says, oh, I'm against firearm ownership. I'm in favor of firearm ownership. I just want it well regulated. Well, where exactly are people supposed to get training? You know, shouldn't we, you know, if maybe 5 or 10% of his business is going to be somehow selling guns, but 90% of it is training, shouldn't we be happy that someone is actually modernizing the training mechanism that's available for people that are going to have guns? And the fact that someone says, oh, my child will look into the store and see a firearm. Yeah, I'm sure your child sees a lot worse on the internet. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, sorry. Members of the board, thank you. My name is Matt Dickinson. I've been a resident of Bala Cynwyd for about 2 years now. I'm an Orthodox Jew. I'm a private school teacher, and I'm an engineer by day. Quite frankly, we are a targeted group, and it terrifies me. I have a student whose father was one of the rabbis shot in the Colorado shooting, and I feel we need more security. We need more security at our synagogues. We need it at our yeshivas, and Shot Tech they are the people to do it. They provide a very valuable resource to the members of our community. We are the ones who are targeted, and we are the ones who are grateful for their presence. It's quite that simple. Really, that's it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Hello, can you hear me? My name is Yair, and I'm going to ask for 30 seconds extra because I have to reply to one of the things that Stacy just said. She was talking about how the most, shattering moment for her was a mother crying after her kid, and that activated a memory when I was working at Jefferson about 1.5 years ago. This is not what I was planning on talking about. I was walking between the buildings, and suddenly I heard this cry that was so awful, like my heart stopped. I almost fell to the ground. And it was a mother that lost her child, her young child, I think it was 8 years old. He was 8 years old, from gunshot. So, close Bryn. Now, my name is Yair, and unfortunately, I'm very familiar with guns because I'm an Israeli originally, and I was living in Israel for many years, most of my life until 20 years ago or so. And I served in the IDF in a small combat special unit, so I activated a lot of different weapons and guns. And I hate it. I'm also very familiar with guns from the other side. I'm a physician. I've been working in different hospitals across the world for more than 20 years. And as such, I've seen a lot of suffering. And the worst of it, more than in South Africa and in Israel and in the Far East, is actually in New York, when I was working in Columbia and later in the Bronx. The amount of suffering that I saw because of deaths and gunshot victims is just, I can't even tell you. It's horrible. My personal story is very relevant because we moved here. Next week, it's going to be exactly 1 year. We live in Marion Station, and we love it. Why did we move here? Because we were in South Philly. My wife was taking our 2 little kids to a park, a little park, very cute park by Queens Village. She was there with the kids. There was a couple of slides. There was one basketball hoop. There were a couple of teenagers playing. My child, who was Aviv, who was 3 years old, she was talking to one of these teenagers, and then she ran to the slides. And my wife was joking around with the teenager. A van stopped. A gun came out with a gun. A guy came out with a gun and started shooting. The guy that my wife was talking to, his head exploded in front of her face. She grabbed my daughter from here and my son from here and hysterically started running away and crying. And this is a real story, and immediately we started looking for another place to live. We have decided to live in Lower Marion, in this community, because we have heard so much things about from so many friends and family members about the quality of this place, about what a wonderful place. Kids who were raised here are now our friends. People who are raising kids are also our friends. It's paradise. I know somebody who, when I moved here, he was telling me, listen, I'm a businessman, I lived all over the world. This area here is paradise. I'm telling you because
Sir, please address.
I'm a proud American. No, I have to look at you. I'm a proud American.
Sir.
I'm a proud Israeli.
Please don't yell at each other.
I'm a proud Israeli. I'm a proud American, and I'm a proud Jew. And I'm asking you to take away your violence, your threats, like you just told us, you and your friends. Take your violence, your hatred, your threats, your negativity, and your guns, and go somewhere else.
Ladies and gentlemen. Excuse me. So, look, we all feel very strongly about this. It is really important to this board and to this community that let's keep it level, okay? If we don't, we're going to have to recess this board, but let's keep it level. We can all do that. Thank you. Sir.
How you doing? My name is Marcus Hirschhorn. I, like Yair, served in the Israeli army. I spent 3.5 years as an infantryman in Golani, 51st Battalion. I was a squad-designated marksman, which basically meant I shot longer than everyone else, further distances. I was also combat armorer, which meant I fixed guns while people were shooting at us. And what Grant said in the recorded video was 100% correct. There are people who hate us simply because we are Jewish. I have heard in English, German, and Arabic, "death to the Jew," more times than I care to remember. Unfortunately, these are not idle threats. Whether it's here or anywhere else in the world, we have seen Jews are uniquely targeted. Here in America, we hear all the time about neo-Nazis, whether it's Charlottesville or January 6th. We also know, as we've seen all too well in Uvalde, that the cops will not protect you if something ever goes bad. So who's here to protect us? Who is here to protect the Jew in his community when even the cops will wait outside while you get killed? Grant is not selling guns. Grant is training people to do exactly that. For anyone to say that he should not be training people, he should not be training Jews in Jewish communities to defend themselves against the Nazis, which I'm sure every single person in this room would agree with me are the stank of the earth, well, where are your priorities going to lie? Whose side are you going to choose? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening, everyone. Andrew Driscoll, first resident of Haverford on Laurel Lane. As growing up, went to Welsh Valley, Harrington High School. then Villanova University, so I moved to Bryn Mawr and 34 South Warner, which is actually, after researching, meeting Grant, was also the other FFL that is in Lower Merion Township, and my next door neighbor George, who I've known forever, and I believe he plays the organ in the local church there. And then I served 5 years in the military, so very familiar with guns. I am pro-Second Amendment. I am free enterprise, and I do think that there's lots of legislation that needs to be looked at. I respect that the township's going to do that, understand that process. I do have a request of living next to an FFL and owning that property until just last year, and now living in Bala Cynwyd, that the FFL and the training are two separate operations. And these operations have been brought together under one commercial space. I totally respect gun training, and I am all for gun training. Shot Tech to stay as a gun training facility, fully support. But the FFL license can also be at another property. So my first ask is the FFL be carried out in a place that George at 32 South Warner Ave, how he operates, that it be carried out at separate locations, not in a 1,000-meter from a school, not next to a school bus stop, not next to commercial activities. And lastly, there's the financial impact. I don't know how any of you have voted financially in this township, but I've seen a lot of decisions are all financially driven. The first thing my wife and I said is, let's start looking for another house. So just like we see people from South Philly coming here, our first thought was, we're looking for another house. Rachel, you can hide if you want. And the second aspect of the financial piece is Bala Ave looks like a war zone. I've served 2.5 years in Baghdad, and that's because of the zoning and the financial decisions that have been made and lack of action to hold these planners and developers and not just go after tax money, that has destroyed Bala Ave. So I think it's as much of a gun problem as we do have a zoning and financial problem on Bala Ave. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Priscilla Fitzpatrick. I wasn't planning on speaking, but I have a question. I live on Bryn Mawr Avenue in Bala, and I have several Orthodox neighbors. A few that I seem to be friendly with, but many of whom don't talk to me or talk to my family, basically don't acknowledge me. So really my question is more towards the Orthodox community that were represented today, as if you're teaching your children that you're hated, that people hate you, and we want to believe that mental health contributes to a lot of shootings, I would ask you what the statistics might be in your community for mental health issues. Because if people that believe everyone hates them are taught to use guns, what might start happening in our community if they automatically assume that they're hated? And I do have a second question. And I realize this is going to be a reach because I am not a person of color, but I have to ask how different this would be if this was a black-owned shop and a black-owned community came up here and said, we teach our children that we are hated and that we have a right to defend ourselves. I wonder how comfortable you might be with that. That's it. Thank you. Or Muslim,
All right.
color. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Rachel Baker Mann. I'm a resident of Bala Cynwyd. My husband and I moved here with our newborn son in 2016, and my parents, Tom and Sharon Baker, have been residents of Bala Cynwyd since 2011. I also wasn't planning on speaking, but I was just moved a bit by something that Priscilla said. I do want to apologize to Priscilla on behalf of the Orthodox community in Lower Merion. I am a board member of Kohelet Yeshiva High School, which is one of the Orthodox schools that's within walking distance. My father is the immediate past president of Lower Merion Synagogue, which is the synagogue that does receive some protection from Grant. I also do want to say to Grant that I am extremely grateful to you as a member of the community for the security training that you provide. And I want to clarify that, similar to what Andrew, who's a dear neighbor of mine just said, I think that there's a big distinction between the fact that this is an FFL and the fact that this place is providing security training. I also do not want this to turn into a divisive split between our neighborhood, which I do think coexists really beautifully. In addition to being a member of the Orthodox Synagogue and sending my children to the Orthodox schools here, I'm also an active member of the Kinwood Club. I used to take my kids to Trails End Cafe every morning to watch the trains, where we became friends with our neighbors. We are good friends with our neighbors on the street regardless of their religious affiliation, and it really pains me and it pains my family that there are people here who claim to stand for one community or another, and that it's becoming a community divisive issue. So I would just like to implore everybody in the crowd here to please not place labels on other members of the community because one person who happens to be affiliated with one religious institution is saying something. It doesn't mean that everybody in the community stands for that. And I also want to take a moment to give some gratitude to Grant for what he is providing. That is an important service for our schools. And as a mom who has kids in the neighborhood here, I do understand that there are targets, not just to our schools, but to all of the schools in the neighborhood, and I wish that all the schools could get the sort of security training and security protection that some of our private institutions are lucky to have. So again, please, I don't want this to turn into something that tears our community apart, because we are a diverse community, and that's one of the reasons that my family chose to settle here and raise our children here. So please just keep that in mind as you're listening to everybody tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir.
Hi, I'm Andrew Smolar. I live in Bala Cynwyd. I'm a psychiatrist. My wife, Ann, is a psychologist. I've been in practice a long time. I've been trying to understand over the last 5-6 years why this country is imploding and why large groups of people are espousing hatred. And I'm distraught about it. And I think we have a cultural illness that's been spreading. I think the guns are part of it. They're not the whole story. But as some people more educated about statistics cited earlier tonight, the guns aren't helping. There isn't a way to argue that 400 million guns circulating in this country are helpful. Not from my point of view, and not from what I see in my office. I think that represented tonight is a very good example, if you want to look at the group process of tonight's meeting, that animosity, hatred is already hinted at between groups living in our community. And I think that it would be really helpful if we thought about as a community how to put together a group of people, Jews, non-Jews, blacks, whites, people of diverse backgrounds and diverse points of view to discuss this kind of issue and to figure out what to do about the fear and the hatred that I think a lot of us have been in touch with and can feel. You can even feel it in this meeting. And the only way as a country we're going to get any better and heal from what's been tearing us apart over the last 5 or 6 years is if we sit down and figure out how to reach some kind of consensus and agreement about these different feelings that I think largely have to do with fear at heart, and then defensive responses to the fear. So I think we should give thought to putting together some kind of group with different representations to talk about this in a more constructive way and in a more spread out way. It can't really be done 2 minutes at a shot. Thanks.
Next.
Good evening. My name is Aaron Gross. I am also the president of the Neighborhood Club of Bala Cynwyd, but I'm here representing myself and not the Neighborhood Club tonight. Let me just say that the issue of guns has been something that's been important to me for many, many years. Before law school, I did an internship with Senator Chris Murphy, During law school, I wrote a final paper on statistics and guns about on statistics and the law, and I chose to write it on suicide. In law school as well, I also started the Penn Law Students Gun Forum, and I externed for a congressman on Capitol Hill, where I wrote a bill that went to legislative council. As well, my parents, my father is a rabbi, both of my grandfathers are rabbis, and my mother is a school principal. So these are issues that I'm familiar with and things that I know about. I wanted to bring it to everybody's attention what the real issue is here tonight. Just today, there was a national tragedy. 17 people were killed, were shot, and they were shot by people who have went through the most highly sophisticated training in the world for the use of guns. They were shot by people who know how to use guns, and they were young, most likely between the ages of 18 and 34, black, white, mostly white, many men and women. And the same tragedy happened yesterday, and the same tragedy is going to happen tomorrow because these people shot themselves. That's the national tragedy. The national tragedy isn't the guns, the sporadic major shootings that are horrific, that tug at our hearts. The tragedy is when a 2-year-old shoots his 9-year-old sibling, because that happens every day if you look at the T-shirts outside the churches on City Avenue. The gun lobby and the gun companies want you to believe that this is about one thing, that this is about violence. They promote violence. It's important that there's violence because if there's no violence, there are no handguns. I'm all for guns. I support security guards having guns. I believe that security guards in synagogues should have security, that schools and synagogues should have security, and that's important. But not that there's 30 people in the synagogue shooting, cross-shooting at each other when something happens. And the proprietor of the store can tell you that if you don't have training, that's what's going to happen. I just want to leave you off with this. When I moved to Miami, my parents moved to Miami when I was a young child, and I was 6 years old, and they were looking for a house. And they had many options. Many of them, it's being Miami, had pools. And they decided not to get a pool, and I'll finish up. They decided not to get a pool. And my father explained to me for a very simple reason. He said that, thank God my parents had 5 kids when we moved and 9 kids today. Should all be well. A kid can't drown in a pool in your backyard if there's no pool in your backyard. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Crystal Joe.
Ma'am, if you can pull the microphone and get closer.
Hello. My name is Crystal Joe. I live in Bala Kingwood. Today I'm a little bit confused with when the owner of the gun shop says that it's not a gun shop, it's just a training place. But I happen to have a screenshot of the screenshot of the owner's Facebook that he posted on July 5th. And it says, personal shopping and background checks for transfers, showroom coming soon. Yes, you say you don't have showroom now, but are you planning to have showroom in the future? And what kind of showroom is it? And could it be a scenario that people get guns from your place and carry guns and walking on the street of Ballard Avenue and walking to the playground nearby? I would appreciate if the owner, since you're here, if you could kind of clarify what your message on Facebook is, and is it also like a mistake or like what you said you had on your website?
Yeah, we don't. If there are questions for the board, you'll have to just do that offline or just step outside the room and you can do it there. Thank you.
My name is Hannah Hammermesh. I've been a resident of Bala Cynwyd since 1998. I am a licensed clinical psychologist. I work in an elementary school in Upper Darby, where we recently lost a child across the street because of an accidental shooting with a family gun. I'm also a member of the Orthodox community, and I would just echo Rachel's request to please not take the word of a few people to necessarily be representative of all of us. We are a diverse community with many opinions and many different patterns of behavior. I want to take a minute to just recognize the Lower Merion Police Department. We have had several interactions with them over the years, ranging from somebody, an elderly person lost in our neighborhood who needed assistance, and having our home broken into. We've had nothing but positive experiences with them, and they've been so sensitive and thoughtful and responsive. I feel like we're very lucky to live in a community that has that kind of support. And the last thing we need is a vigilante squad. I recognize, I am part of a targeted group. It is true, there is no denying that there are people out to kill Jews because we are Jews. But to create a vigilante squad in the community is not the right response. Thank you.
Thank you.
I am Nasreen Malik. I'm a physician. I have lived with my husband and 3 children in Bala Cynwyd for 19 years now. My husband is a surgeon. He's regularly called to North Philly to operate on gunshot wound victims. I just want to make a point about, I come from a Muslim background. People also hate Muslims because they're Muslim. I would not call people at a mosque to arm themselves. I think this is a dangerous slope we're on. Let's all arm ourselves and create mini militias across the United States. I would like to trust my police force and security, trained security officers, to protect our community and not have these militias. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Is there anyone else in the room who wishes to take advantage of public privilege? Last call, yeah.
Hi, good evening. Elisa Dianeem, I live in Bala Cynwyd. I'm a rehabilitation nurse, and I have had significant experience with the rehabilitation of victims of gunshot wounds. It's awful, awful, the tragedies. I'm also a member of the Orthodox community, and I will echo that I am not a supporter of guns or of an armed militia in my community. I do truly respect and value our police department, and more funds to the police department, go for it. That's where it should go. Training of gun use, I'm all for it. Transfer of guns, having actual weapons go from a storefront into someone's hand and then down the street, no way. That is what we're talking about, I think. It's across the street, down the street from the arts, I'm sorry, soup, I can't remember the name. There are children everywhere. It is just not appropriate. The gun transfer should be somewhere else. The training, they can stay there, I don't really care. But the gun transfer out does not belong on a street like Bala Avenue and in our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So ladies and gentlemen, so in addition to the people in the room, we have people online who are also going to make comments. So again, please, let's just keep this moving along. Please don't applaud. Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
I'm Dan Powell. I'm from Bala Cynwyd. I live literally 2 minutes from the shop. I think I want to take a different approach here and not address what's already been addressed, although I think many of the things that have been said are incredibly important. I want to talk about the financial impact of having a gun-type shop in our neighborhood may have. We have seen significant investment right on that corner with the BMW dealership redeveloped, with the creation of the Heritage Cynwyd Trail, which was funded by the state, at least in part, with the adaptation of cross properties, putting up apartments, and with hope, and I know the commission here has worked on trying to get the theater up and running again. On top of all of this investment already made, both in terms of effort and in terms of finances, is our real estate, which also is going to be impacted by this type of operation in our neighborhood. We have opportunities to have training facilities, as has been described, but we also have industrial space in Bala-Cynwyd, which I've explored those areas. There's open areas, open shops, properties that are not rented, that would provide sufficient space, adequate facilities to conduct that type of work. And that needs to be explored. It can't be in a residential neighborhood where the impact is not only on the safety of the children, safety of adults, but also the financial impact on the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Sure.
Hello, my name is Perry Kaplan. I am a proud resident of Bala-Cynwyd. I was going to talk about real estate, but you addressed it. Okay. I guess, so why I was in line, I thought it was an important instead of really getting confrontational. Just wanted to simply ask Grant a question, and I think people have talked about it a few different times. Why can't it be separated? Why can't he do the training, which I think a lot of people are for? I might not necessarily be for it, but why can't it be separated? Why can't he have a separate area that's farther away from schools and everyone can work together to come to a solution that might work better for people that are obviously very passionate about it? So that's really my question for Grant, if he can address that, or if that's okay.
Okay, so thank you, sir. So let me just be clear. This is public privilege of the floor to address the board on things we can do. I think in the beginning, Mr. Schmidt said, hey, if you have questions for him, you could send him an email. He's in the room. I mean, you can certainly just pull him aside and talk to him outside. We're not going to be able to answer those questions. Ma'am, please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Nadine Strugi. I have lived in Bala-Cynwyd since I was born, 51 years. We have lived in the same house for 50 of them, and my father is Palestinian. We have been targeted multiple times. We are a Catholic family, but that doesn't seem to stop people from targeting us. My father got multiple death threats after 9/11. I've been put on a do not fly list because of my last name. We travel back and forth to Israel, where my father's family still lives. I have guns pointed at my head. I've been strip searched since I was 13 years old, taken into private rooms with guns pointed at me. And I am not gonna lie, I am not comfortable with a person who has been very verbal both on his personal social media and also with community members, that he is trying to essentially do what many people have stated. He is trying to arm a certain community. As a family who has been targeted because of our ethnicity multiple times living in Bala-Cynwyd, I was brought to tears at our meeting at Maria Wells's house when I heard some of the things that had been verbalized from this man to other people about his goals with arming a certain community. And when children are being taught that they are hated for no reason, you know who else is hated for no reason? We are. We are a Catholic family. We have Orthodox friends. All of our neighbors are Jewish. I went to Lower Merion High School. I was one of maybe 3 kids that wasn't Jewish, and I love all of them. They are my dearest friends. I didn't live here for most of my life. I've been taking care of my now 93-year-old mother for the past 7 years, and my best friends that I grew up with are still my very best friends in the world, and we would do anything in the world for each other, and they are all Jewish. And I had the Standing Against Anti-Semitism on my Facebook page when every single attack was made. We don't need this in our community, and I'm tired of being targeted for who I am. Y'all want to talk about Jews being targeted? Well, there's lots of people who are targeted. Muslims and Sikh are actually the 2 disproportionate targeted groups in America based on population numbers and the amount of crimes against them because of how they worship. I understand that this is a Jewish community. It is the only 2 people that are disproportionately targeted in our country are Muslims and Sikhs. I am neither of which.
But we have been targeted simply because people assume, because we're Palestinian, that that's who we are. And if anything happens to me or my family, our blood is on your hands for letting somebody like this, who has these feelings and thoughts, is verbal about them, social media and with people, allowing them to run a facility arming their community. Because I'm their target.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to stop this meeting if we continue to have applause. Okay? It is a terrific community. We can hear each other out. Okay? We are not going to take that route. Thank you. Jody, do we have people online?
There are people online. If anyone online would like to speak, if you would please raise your virtual hand. Okay. We have Maren Cohen, who should appear momentarily.
Okay, thank you.
Hello there. Can everyone hear me? Yeah. Okay. My name is Maren Cohen, and I'm a rising high school junior and have lived in the Bala-Cynwyd neighborhood all of my life. Let me set the scene of my neighborhood. A neighborhood with playgrounds projecting laughs through the trees, a Thai restaurant serving sweet tea just a few doors down from a seafood restaurant with meals that smell so good, a 20s era movie theater echoing with history that the community wishes would open again, a popular trail that stretches over the Schuylkill River carrying families biking, dogs and owners jogging, children biking together to get ice cream, a plant store, a nail salon, a fabric store, an art center decorated from wall to wall with the color of creativity made by children who feel safe. Those kids, however, will not feel safe for long. Their parents won't either, and I won't, because guns are being sold 5 shops down from this art center where I work. Shot Tech LLC is now open on Bala Avenue, 5 shops away from where I work with children, a 13-minute walk away from my house, and a several-minute drive to the nearest 5 schools. I'm 16 years old, and I never would have thought that the officials in my town would allow the devastation I watch on the news to get its start in my town, or that our neighborhood would be the next in the never-ending stories of gun violence. I don't want for Bala-Cynwyd to be the next town known in the papers for why other towns need gun control. I want to be the town that shuts it down before we reach the headlines, before any lives are lost. For my generation, my mind goes instantly to lives lost because of shooters in schools. I feel obligated to share this news with my community because this store is now open, and soon people are going to be walking out of that firearms store holding guns, as mentioned on his website, as I play with my campers about 100 feet away in the courtyard outside the art center. What frightens me the most is how few people know that this is occurring, guns being sold right under our noses, or rather under a beauty bar, as if the shop itself is hiding, knowing no one wants a gun shop in their safe town. I don't know what else I can do except believe that we as a neighborhood can shut this store down before anyone else is harmed, before Bala-Cynwyd is wounded in ways that cannot be healed. Thank you.
Thank you. Jody, anyone else?
I do not see anyone else with their hand raised.
Okay, anyone online, it's your last chance to make public privilege. If you raise your virtual hand, Jody will let you in.
I see no one.
Okay. Everyone, thank you very much for your comments. I think we have seen that there is a lot of very thoughtful and articulate and passionate views here. And I appreciate your forbearance with me as I tried to keep this moving along and giving everyone a chance to be heard. And I appreciate that we all listened and everyone here listened, and that was very nice to see. We had 38 people who submitted comments by email. They were all in opposition to the location of Shot Tech LLC. Their comments, which we all have copies of and have read, basically echo what was said here tonight, so I'm not going to take the time to read them again. If anyone wants copies, they are available from the township secretary. You can just email Jody Kelly and she will provide the comments. They are not a private thing, they are public. I'm going to read the names of the people who submitted comments, because that's what we do. And again, they're all in opposition to the location of Shot Tech. Susan Barron Pearson, Tara Barabee, Joan Bedesh, Nikki and Mark Bress, George Buckman, Maren Cohen, Danielle Cullen, Heather Dixon, Margaret Duffy, Roberta Epstein, Heather Exley, John Fisher and Gabriel Grode, Stephen Graybell, Panina Braffman, Nancy Hillis, Julie Hochman, Michelle Kornblit, Susan Love, Marissa McIntosh, Nazreen Malik, Lisa Maslow, Mike, who did not provide a last name, Kristen Miller, Olivia Mitchell, Roger Moog, Marjorie Ockrock, Amanda Olson, who spoke tonight, Linda Pitt, Amelia Powell, so some of these people also spoke this evening, Roberta and Julia Pugliese, I apologize if I butchered that, Sherry, Ken, Sammy, and Julia Resnick, Christy Rosengart, Bob Ruggieri, Jill Ruggieri, Patty Smith, Ann Eichen-Smillar, Suzanne Spiegelman, and Lori and Erica Wax. So with that, that is the public privilege of the floor. Now it's the opportunity for the commissioners, should they choose, to respond to public privilege. And do any of my fellow board members wish to respond to public privilege? Commissioner Gilda Kramer.
Thank you, President Sinai. Hundreds of people have called or emailed me about the store on Bala Avenue. Attended an impromptu neighborhood meeting on my block hosted by the Wellses 2 weeks ago. Joined Commissioners McComb, McKeon, State Representative Mary Jo Daley and me for a town hall last week, submitted public comment and spoken in here today. And I want to thank you all for coming and speaking about what your concerns are. I assure all of you that I understand and share your concerns. This business in this location is not in keeping with the character of our peaceful, safe, family-oriented residential neighborhood filled with schools and places of worship. Its presence so close to where we live and our children play and go to school is alarming, even frightening to many, and raises many legitimate concerns about safety. I also understand the special concerns of our Orthodox Jewish neighbors, as I am Jewish too, and my grandparents were Orthodox, and I grew up going to an Orthodox shul in upstate New York with my grandparents. But that's not the issue. And as a couple of our neighbors said tonight, we should not have divisions in our community over this issue. We are one community. I know that many of our residents may not like or approve of the proliferation of guns in our country and community and are deeply worried about accelerating incidents of gun violence and mass shootings around the country, and including in our own region. Nonetheless, this is a legal business operating properly under our zoning code. I have spoken with the owner of the business, and I hope that an amicable solution can be found that would satisfy everyone's concerns. I promise you that I will work hard to develop prospective ways to protect the safety and character of our community within the confines of the law. And I hope that you will continue to share your concerns with me.
Thank you, Commissioner Kramer. Other commissioners wish to respond. Commissioner McCann.
Thank you, President Sinai. I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. Thank you for your patience and for remaining civil. I know this is a very emotional issue for many of us. I live on Conshohocken State Road, a few long blocks down from the gun store with my wife and my two daughters. We do not own any guns in our house. I don't begrudge gun owners, but I think a gun in my house, I'm a fairly clumsy person, that makes our house a little more dangerous, so we don't have any. As far as this issue before us now, I think Commissioner Kramer, with her words, actually really hit on a couple different approaches. She mentioned an amicable solution, and one area I hope that there's room to negotiate with Mr. Schmidt. I've heard a lot of people say that they're really fine with, if they have to, having a gun shop in the area that's not a gun shop, that's a training facility only, that there aren't any transfers. So I don't know if there's any room. I know a couple residents actually asked the question to see if the transfers could be stopped or done somewhere else, because I think the transfer of firearms is really the primary driver of a lot of concerns that people have. And the other area, as Commissioner Kramer mentioned too, is prospective ways. And I think that there's certainly room for the township to look into some kind of an ordinance to regulate firearms, possibly in general ways, but there's a lot of things that municipalities have done. But as we've heard before too, there are limitations. Pennsylvania state law preempts municipal law insofar as the Uniform Fire Act, which states no county, municipality, or township, so that's us, we're a township, may in any manner regulate the lawful ownership, possession, transfer, which is what we're dealing with here, or transportation of firearms, ammunition, or ammunition components when carried or transported for purposes not prohibited by the laws of the Commonwealth. The city of Philadelphia, which is also a municipality, tried to get around this. They adopted an ordinance that said if you lose your firearm or it's stolen, within 24 hours you have to report it. I like that. I think that's a very good ordinance. It promotes responsible fire ownership, and I think we want responsible firearm owners. Unfortunately, that was actually struck down just this year, February 2022, the PA Commonwealth Court, in a decision, I know there's a lot of lawyers out here, Philadelphia versus Armstrong, 271 A3D 555 PA Commonwealth 2022. So I am committed to furthering negotiations with the owner to try to get an amicable solution. I'm also committed to trying to see what we can do in terms of an ordinance and what kind of legislative action we can take. But I just want to point out that there are certain limitations because we're a municipality, and state law, as we've heard a little bit before, boxes us out and preempts us from some options. So again, thank you everyone for coming out. I mean, we were here tonight to listen. We've been looking into things, and we're going to continue to look into things. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner McCann. Anyone else? Commissioner Sean Kramer.
Thank you. I'd just like to echo what my colleagues have said. Thank you all for coming out and speaking so eloquently about this very important issue that you clearly feel very strongly about. I'd like to thank Commissioner McCann for what you just said about your proposals. I fully support them and feel confident that our board will do the best we can to address these concerns. I would also like to say this is an issue that requires advocacy, and you're good advocates. This is an issue that requires advocacy at multiple levels of government. So I just encourage you to use your skills and your talents at the state level as well as the federal level, if I may. Pennsylvania laws leave something to be desired, and you can make a difference. So thank you for coming out, and keep up the good work.
Thank you, Commissioner Kramer. Commissioner Bernheim.
Thank you very much, President Sinai. And I actually had no intention of speaking to this issue this evening, in that I have done so on many, many occasions and for many, many years. But I need to sort of correct the record a little bit, in that reference was made to a prior attempt of the township to have some legislation regarding guns. And during that time, I had one of the best privileges of my life to be able to sit in the chair where President Sinai is, as we did this in connection with trying to pass an ordinance which dealt with the carrying and discharge of guns in our parks. Right? And the ordinance, as I recollect, because I haven't pulled the decisions because I didn't intend to speak on this, indicated that absent a special permit, an exemption, or absent a special permit, unless there's an exception, one couldn't do that. Pragmatically, you can't really think of a good reason to carry a gun in one of our parks. Nevertheless, that was then challenged, and it was challenged under a statute which permitted somebody who was not even a resident of the community, never stepped foot in the community, never had a citation, to challenge the ordinance and, if successful, make the township pay for council fees. There were several attempts under what was known as Act 192 to go ahead and do that. The only place where it proceeded was in Lower Merion, because one of the plaintiffs who spoke here this evening was one of the members that put his name on that particular petition to enjoin the ordinance. So the ordinance went first in its challenge of a preliminary injunction to Montgomery County. And here in Montgomery County, they stated that our ordinance was sufficiently lawful because we were protecting our own property and had the same right as a township to do that as you may have to have restrictions in your own home. That was then appealed to the Commonwealth Court. And there was a 2-to-1 decision. So the total vote is 1 judge here in Montgomery County, 1 dissenter who thought our ordinance was appropriate, but unfortunately 2 on the Commonwealth Court did not. As indicated by Commissioner McKeon, the laws in Pennsylvania regarding restrictions on guns are even more restrictive, if I may, or prohibitive than the U.S. Constitution. The Pennsylvania Constitution states the rights of the citizens to bear arms in defense of themselves and the state shall not be questioned. That is different than the U.S. Constitution, and I don't want to get into that discussion here this evening because we'd be here for quite some time. But the ultimate decision became, could we protect our own property, or, as the majority in the Commonwealth Court held, that no, we were exercising governmental authority and relying on police to do something. Therefore, they indicated that the same section that Commissioner McKeon read was something that preempted and precluded us from doing so. So the long-winded comment that I didn't intend, the purpose of which is this has been a board since as long as I've been on here, has tried to go ahead and protect the community, but as eloquently noted by Commissioner Kramer, we need to do so within the confines of the law. But that doesn't mean that we don't go ahead and look very hard at that which we can do for the community. And as noted by Commissioner Sean Kramer, the real fight is not at this legislative body, but up one at the Senate. And while Congress pats themselves on the back for this namby-pamby bill that they jointly passed recently without addressing AR-15 weapons, that's where the fight is. And come November, please keep that in mind. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Bernheim. Any other of my fellow commissioners? Okay, so seeing none, I'm going to say a last word. So I just wanted, to first again, thank you very much for all your comments and coming out tonight and participating in both speaking and listening. I think hopefully it's clear that there's when we say when I said at the beginning, this is something that we are looking into what we can do, right? That was not an empty statement. I hope you can also recognize at this point that if I or anyone on this board were at this point to sit here and just give you a glib, hey, we're just going to take care of this, you should be dubious because it is not that easy, right? And so it is a process that we have to engage in to figure out what it is that we can do, right? And I fully understand the comments that say, hey, we don't believe you, that sounds like empty platitudes. And I fully understand the reaction that says, look, you guys could be more creative than that, right? And look, they sound like empty platitudes. From my chair, they're not. This is something that we will work on and we will try and do what we can do within what the landscape of the laws here, right? Because I think what we can do is more than zero. Right? And probably not as much as what a lot of you want us to do, right? And we will try. Anyway, thank you again for your participation this evening. So with that, we turn to public comment, which is the section of our meeting where members of the public may address the board on any agenda items. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. And we're going to have comments on all agenda items except for the transportation demand and land development definition reserve parking ordinances that are being considered for adoption, because that will have public comment at that point. So anyone with public comment, we'll wait for people to leave the room and then we'll move to public comment. And so yeah, if you are done participating for this evening, I'm just going to ask you to move your conversations outside.
No applause. Come on.
Should applaud because I wrote out comments and decided not to give them.
I wish the board would rule as soon as I wasn't going to talk, just say, thank you.
I've said
Okay, sir, thank you for your patience. Okay.
Good evening. My name is Stanley Shapiro. I live in Wynwood, across the street from Penwyn Elementary School, and I went to Lower Merion Public Schools from kindergarten through 12th grade, continuously. And so I'm a local product. I'm here about the proposals to make changes at Penwyn Elementary School that are on the agenda. First of all, if I could call your attention to page 9, item 15, where it says, if the traffic study is not supplied by the school district within 6 months of the increase, the reserved parking will be installed. I think you mean will not be installed. You might check that. Also, as you may or may not know, part of this proposal is to remove the 2 mobile classrooms. I don't know what the rule is about work done before it's approved, but one of those classrooms has already been removed. As of today, it was sitting on the parking lot, ready to be taken from the site, and workers were preparing to remove the other one. So I also would like to bring up some questions about the map that I've seen of the area, and in particular, the construction of the 4,400 square foot hard surface. I have some problems with that. First of all, no actual width and length are given, simply a total area. My estimate of the area is that it will protrude approximately a third of the distance from the face of the school to Trent Road over the grassy field there. That's not the way it's drawn in the pictures that have been included. There's no mention in here of the trees that are going to be removed. And also, it looks like there needs to be some grade changing because of the height from the bottom of the stairs on that side of the school to the field. And I don't think they intend to put asphalt over a steep, admittedly small, but steep slope there. So I think there's several problems with this particular proposal that I hope will be addressed or considered. Also, there's mention of a pathway that I think, porous asphalt pathway. There's already, I think, a pathway where they're talking about. So there are a number of differences between what we're seeing here and what's actually the case on the ground. And I think in particular it's important to look at how far into the field the asphalt will extend, because it's not as portrayed in this diagram that I've seen in some of the documents about this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else, excuse me, wish to make public comment? Jody, do we have anyone online for public comment?
Do not see any, yes, Ben Meyer, I'll put him in.
All right.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to, I'm Ben Meyer from a neighbor of the elementary school, Penwyn Elementary School. I'm just speaking only for myself. I'm sorry this paving of the field is happening at Penwyn. I think the only reason is to reserve the impervious space. The school already has more hardtop play area on Suffolk side of the property per student than any other elementary school. Nevertheless, it was the best we neighbors in the township could negotiate under the circumstances. I definitely agree with the previous speaker that if the width and length isn't defined, that makes it not exactly a plan. I know it's a little wider because they're putting in the stormwater management, I guess. On a more philosophical level, it's occurred occurring to me that the actions and reactions on both sides are part of it, something I've been pondering between fine-grained legislation trying to stop it and human nature. But anyway, the specific thing I asked you to consider putting in there is I asked the commissioners to put explicit language in this approval that that the new impervious on the field shall not exceed 4,400 square feet to avoid the contractors rounding up. When they put in the little pathway that the other person mentioned, I pointed it out to the inspector, the building inspector, and the school that it was wider than it was scaled on the drawing. And to the school's credit, they did fix it, I believe, or maybe they were intending it, but it was dug out much wider than the square footage. So I hope you say do not exceed 4,400 square feet and allow the contractor to add, to round it up simply. I think people just love their green space in Lower Merion, and not only this, but future green spaces I hope you're planning. All right, thank you very much for your time and good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Myers. Jody, is that it?
That is it.
Okay. Does any board member wish to respond to any of the comments? Commissioner Churchill.
Thank you very much. I can address one or two of the issues. You gave me several, and I'll be happy afterwards on out back to do as best I can to address those issues. I know that my understanding regarding the temporary classrooms, that they could be moved when the school district wanted to, and they obviously want to, in preparation for September opening. I think that's why I haven't been here, but if you said one trailer is going and the other one is going, I believe you. My understanding in the back about the impervious surface, or that they are allowed to do preliminary work. They can't move any dirt until we're voting on this preliminary plan tonight. But they were allowed to just do some preliminary work as long as they didn't do any digging. That's my understanding. And the other issues that you have, I'll be happy to discuss them in the back room. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Commissioner Churchill. Any other commissioners wish to respond to public comment? Okay, seeing none, that closes public comment. So we move to the consent calendar, which is on page 4 of your packet. In item E, which is the Penguin Elementary School land development applications being removed from the consent calendar, does anyone want to remove any of the other items from consent? Okay, nope. Okay, so I move that we approve the consent calendar as amended. Madam Secretary, do I have a second? Thank you, Vice President Gavin. Jody, will you please call the roll?
For the adoption of the consent calendar as amended, Mr. Bernheim.
Aye.
Mr. Courtney.
Yes.
Mr. Gavin.
Yes.
Mr. Grimes.
Yes.
Ms. S. Kramer.
Yes.
Ms. G. Kramer.
Yes.
Mr. McComb.
Yes.
Mr. McKeon.
Yes.
Ms. O'Neill. Aye. Mr. Stevenson.
Aye.
Mr. Whalen.
Yes.
Mr. Zillow.
Aye.
Mr. Sinai.
Yes.
The consent calendar is duly adopted.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. So we have 2 items then from Building and Planning. The first is 65 Sandra Court. And we have our Director of Building and Planning, Chris Lutzwing, to give us an explanation.
Yes. Last week at the Building and Planning Committee, Commissioner O'Neill had brought up a point about the layout of the new trees along the cul-de-sac of the subdivision. At the preliminary subdivision phase, there had been a condition requiring that the trees be informally spaced, to be consistent with the idea of being an open space preservation district. She had made a recommendation and instructed staff to refine some language to strengthen those and continue some of those conditions going forward into this lot, for just this one lot going forward, which is lot number 2. So I wanted to read in a new condition. This condition will really only apply to this lot. Going forward, the new subdivision ordinance will actually supersede this, and it requires a lot of native plantings that this condition does. But this application had been submitted under the old subdivision codes, and this is a bit of a gap, and it's a good idea from Commissioner O'Neill. And the condition, and it's acceptable to the applicant, is with primary consideration given to reflect the nature preserve aesthetic, 80% of new trees and large shrubs shall be diverse, native, and formally arranged in field located with township staff to ensure visual and thriving continuity of nature.
Okay, thank you, Chris. You know, to be expedient, Commissioner O'Neill, do you want to make this motion?
I'll make the motion.
Okay. Vice President Gavin. Thank you for muting. And okay, so any questions for Chris or Commissioner comments? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to call the vote, right? So we have the public comment. So all those in favor? Do we need a roll call for this? No. Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hand. The motion as amended. Okay, opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. So the next item is the Penguin Elementary School land development. Chris, do you want to explain this?
I can explain. Last week during the board discussion, the applicant had requested some revisions to one of the conditions, and unfortunately, we didn't translate that into your agenda. We need to read that condition in. It's something acceptable. The board had discussed. It was acceptable to the board. It was acceptable to the applicant. Staff just kind of missed that. And that would be revision to condition number 16, so that it would read, at such times as reserved parking may be required, staff requires that the applicant submit a formal plan for the review and approval of the director of building planning to consider any changes to the natural features or site conditions that may have occurred. If such changes are minor, alternatively, if such changes are not minor, approval of the Board of Commissioners shall be required. This condition reflects, there was just some changes to that. It's very similar. I don't have the track changes up on the PowerPoint, but it's.
I'm sorry, you don't have a slide of it, do you?
I do. Give me a sec to share my screen.
Excuse me for.
No, it's okay.
Maybe he can read it again.
I have it here. Yeah.
You have it?
No, I'll pass it. Yeah. I'm gonna need that back.
Chris, actually, he's touched her. Let me read that back.
So I have the slide up here. Make everybody go away. There we go. So it's number 16. I have it up on the board.
So the original condition in 16 is on page 9 of your packet. Do you want to talk about condition 38 and then we'll do
Sure.
at
And then
the same time?
last week, also that was discussed with this application, there was comment made that the reserve parking that connects to Haverford Road from the new lot, there was concern that this application hadn't been vetted by PennDOT. And there was an application, the board directed staff to reach out to PennDOT and also the traffic safety unit to evaluate the feasibility of this, of the proposed site plan. The township engineer, and Mr. Mastronardo is here with us tonight, he relayed that his firm, Pannoni Associates, had informally reached out to PennDOT. PennDOT's not required to give a formal review of this because there isn't really an active application before them, but they ran the reserved parking by them, and they looked at the layout of where the driveway would be in relationship to the existing driveways along Haverford Road, and PennDOT did not identify any red flags or issues with the location that would stop the granting of a highway occupancy permit. As we'd indicated last week, when they go forward, there may be signage that comes up during peak times restricting left turns, but certainly nothing that would prohibit the highway occupancy permit going forward as proposed. The township engineer also met with the traffic safety unit on site. Traffic safety did not identify any issues that would, that they would recommend changing the driveway in any way. So that was to add that reassurance that what was presented can be built. Now, what we're all hoping for is it's held in reserve and that it is actually never built, but if it is never built, it still passes the muster.
Okay, thank you,
So
Chris.
with that, and then just getting back to the condition, with that requirement, condition 38 can now be struck. It's, that has been fulfilled by the applicant during this.
Okay, thank you very much. So before I read in, before I make a motion, any questions for Chris or comment? Commissioner Grimes?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. I just have two questions about number 16. And I think this came up last week, but maybe you're changing this, makes it more apparent. The condition does not say who makes the determination of whether changes are minor, which what I assume would be township staff. Wouldn't it be better to expressly state that township staff makes that decision to avoid any confusion?
This is a belt and suspenders condition. It's actually written in the codes that it actually has the director of building and planning has that authority when the new plan comes forward. So if a plan if an applicant receives approval and then at a later time where they come back to put in a permit that they have to change that plan and they submit it, it's brought before my department, we look at it, and I guess it's my authority, whereas the director of building and planning, to say this is a minor change, a de minimis change, you can go forward, or it warrants an entirely new plan in a public process. This was something that was brought up at the Planning Commission and then got a little bit of a life to itself, and it's a belt and suspenders approach. It doesn't change what's already in the code. If you wanted to strengthen it, that it was, we're trying to reference the director of building and planning, but it doesn't really supersede the township code either.
Okay, so, I mean, I don't want to, I hate to use I can't say over lawyer, I'll say over commissioner this. But, you know, my concern, and then I'm going to defer to your judgment, Chris. My concern is that sometimes we have disagreements with applicants, even when there are cousins at the school district, and that there's differences of interpretation that end up in court. If you're not concerned with that, and I assume that you either have or would, if you had concerns about that, consult with our solicitor, which you don't have to do now, that you would do that. So I'm just, if you believe, if you're satisfied, I'll defer to you on that.
Well, it's as we discussed it with the Planning Commission when this was brought up. When we look at something as a de minimis change, it would really be something that it wouldn't have any impact upon natural features, it wouldn't have any impact upon circulation, it wouldn't have any impact upon trees, right? And this is one of the things. But if all of a sudden the new plan came forward and we know that these are the major elements and concern of this particular site plan, if the applicant had to realign this driveway and it required additional grading and steep slopes, potential impact to the historic resource, because you were lining this up, and the Penn Wynn Elementary School is a historic resource, that would do the trigger and would trigger a new plan. Okay. I mean, so we've thought this through.
So my second, if we could get that back, the condition back up on the screen, or else if President Sandra, I could borrow your copy, so I don't have to wait. Oh, here it comes, never mind. The second question, it says, to consider any changes to the natural features or site conditions that may have occurred if such changes are minor. Wouldn't it be more correct to say any changes to natural features or conditions that may occur, comma, if such changes are minor? Because the changes wouldn't have occurred unless this is approved, correct?
You are correct.
I'm correct?
You are correct.
Okay,
I
so,
think you're reading
thank
right.
you. So I would,
if
that's a friendly, okay, thank you. I don't have to make the amendment.
I haven't made the motion yet anyway, so.
Okay, oh, that's fine. Okay, thank you. All right, well, thank you for the help on that. That concludes my questions. Thank you.
So I will follow up on that. Chris, would there be any harm to saying alternatively, in that last sentence, alternatively, if the Director of Building and Planning determines such changes are not minor, approval of the Board of Commissioners. I know it's belt and suspenders, but is it okay to have the suspenders?
I think I like the suspenders.
Okay. I see the applicant is in the room. Are those are just clarifying changes? Are we okay with those? Okay, thank you. Okay, so any other commissioners? Okay, so I need to read this the way I have it here. So I'm going to move that we approve the Penwyn Elementary School land development with an amendment to condition of approval number 16 that will read, at such time as the reserved parking may be required, staff requires that the applicant submit a formal plan for the review and approval of the Director in Building and Planning to consider any changes to the natural features or site conditions that may occur if such changes are minor. Alternatively, if the Director of Building and Planning determines such changes are not minor, approval by the Board of Commissioners shall be required. And we will do the motion with the deletion of condition of approval number 38. Okay, do I have a second? Okay, thank you, Commissioner Grimes. Okay, so since I just did the motion, anyone have any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? Okay, seeing none, abstentions. That passes with, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We got 8 in the room, and at least one that gets. Okay, so 2 online. So that brings us to some adoption of ordinance, Chapter 155, Zoning Code Parking Reductions to the Transportation Demand Management Plan, which is page 19 of your packet. Going to open the public hearing, and Chris, I guess you can provide an explanation.
Let me get my PowerPoint. Just give me 2 seconds here. My computer seems to have frozen. Well, with the computer freezing, I can take you through the narrative. I won't have the PowerPoint. So the first, there are 2 ordinances that are being considered at the public hearing tonight. They're very much interrelated, and I would like the board's time just to explain them both in tandem, and then you can make separate actions on both of them. A couple years ago, the township proactively adopted a transportation demand ordinance. The idea of this transportation demand ordinance was to reduce single occupancy vehicle trips, reduce traffic in the township. And to do this, it's encouraging non-automotive transportation that reduces single occupancy. Biking, walking, access to transit, buses, shuttles, things to that nature. And with that policy, we've been working it through, and we actually embedded that idea of that policy into our codes in both the zoning code and in the SALDO. While we were updating the SALDO, we were coming forward with a zoning amendment for some specific requirements for reserved parking to incentivize transportation demand management. At that time, we didn't quite have the numbering correct. So the first ordinance deals with the numbering of the SALDO zoning section, where we had originally drafted it 155.8.2. It actually turned out to be 155.8.3, which I'm going to present to you in just a second. That's that clarification, so it's just a reference. The other piece in this first part, in the SALDO, is a definition of land development. We've been through this many times at the board. We're removing the word residential, so the definition of land development is consistent with the municipality's planning code. Now, the other piece of this is, what are those incentives that we're talking about in the zoning code for transportation demand management? One of the key powers that we have to incentivize is parking. Parking is very expensive to developers, and it's a way of trying to reduce those trips to the site. If we can get more people to take transit, to bike, to not do that, we reduce the traffic throughout the township. One of the key elements of parking that we have that we can incentivize is holding parking in reserve. That provides the applicants the ability not to install parking. That creates more green space, but it's also a real cost incentive to applicants going forward. And many times over the years, applicants have come before the township and said, we have, your parking standards require us to put in 100 spaces. Our day-to-day uses only are going to require us to put in 80. We know this from our traffic studies. May we, Board of Commissioners, install only those 80 spaces and hold those 20 in reserve? And the Board of Commissioners can do that. There's a covenant that's required, and the Board of Commissioners holds that into reserve. Stormwater management is required for that parking, but that parking is only required to be installed if that demand for that parking is justified and warranted. I can only recall one instance over the years where a reserve parking has ever had to be put in. So we have reserve parking on the books. What we're looking to do with transportation demand management is also require as a condition, as a requirement of putting in the reserve parking, requiring applicants to meet certain provisions in areas that are on primary roads or in transportation demand service areas where you're seeing the growth in the township. And in that, we're requiring developers to also choose a couple different options to provide certain elements in addition to just holding the parking in reserve. So we've established a table, and this is in your packet. I apologize that my PowerPoint's not working, but we have a chart, and the chart has a column A and a column B. And essentially what applicants are required to do is choose one from column A and one from column B. And some of these are specific requirements that applicants would have to do in addition to holding the parking in reserve. In column A, it would be requiring a trans facility, installing shuttle service, installing a connected public multi-purpose trail. In column B, it could be providing trailhead parking, designating preferential parking for carpools, providing wayfinding signage. So these policy methods would be in here to further strengthen reserve parking. Yesterday, late in the afternoon, staff received a letter from the Montgomery County Planning Commission. The Montgomery County Planning Commission reviews all ordinances before us. In it, they had the county staff had looked at our ordinance, and they had a couple questions. I want to just kind of address those tonight at the meeting. One is clarification of the applicability of those amenities. So if somebody already has a multi-use path on their property, would an applicant be able to take advantage of that? The township's conditional use process allows the board a lot of flexibility. And the way we wrote this ordinance is to provide a lot of flexibility. Each of the sites that would be receiving reserved parking is different, and each of them is going to have a different set of infrastructure, potential infrastructure, and relationship to transit. By writing the ordinance the way we did, it allows that sort of flexibility. Somebody might have a shuttle, that's true, but what we could do through the conditional use process is increase the frequency of that shuttle or require that shuttle to go to other stops. There's a lot of different options that could come out of that. And there was also clarification of why in the code, there's two references to a covenant. One of those references the covenant specifically relating to the transportation improvements for transportation demand management, and the other is a covenant specifically relating to general reserve parking. That just kind of clarifies what the county had gotten into. Happy to answer any of your questions. I apologize for not having the PowerPoint to show you those slides.
Okay, thank you, Chris. We will start with public comment. Does anyone wish to comment on the current ordinance, which is the parking reductions for transportation demand management? It's on our board packets, page 19. Yes, please go ahead.
A couple of things. Just first thing with regards to all hearings or ordinances, it says that it was advertised in the mainline Times.
Mr. Abramson, can you speak up a bit?
Sorry. Okay. It says it was advertised in the mainline Times and Suburban. Would it be possible to also, and not necessarily if it's required, but just publish it on your Facebook, because a lot of people get information from Lower Merion Township's Facebook page, so it would be good, I think, just to advertise it there as well. with regards to the minimum parking, and maybe I'm mistaken, but we just heard before in the conditions of, I think it was conditions of approval or where it was something with the reserve, but it had to be approved by the parking department manager. This hearing now changes the ordinance that it has to be approved by the Board of Commissioners. So it should be, both the same. Also, I noticed that there is mention of covenants and requirements, but is there any timeline? For example, let's say 20 years from now, we decide that we need more parking spots. What happens then? So the owner has to convert the grass into parking. When, how much money? Obviously we can't have escrow because it's not something required. But so that's one thing that I just wanted to know if there is mention of what are the timelines. Also, just with regards to section F, where it says that the applicant may appeal such order to the zoning hearing board. It's my understanding that the Board of Commissioners give the exemption to the property owner and say, hey, you really need to have this many parking spots. We're giving you an out to have now, grass or whatever, but you have to just keep it in reserve. Why then would that have to get appealed to the zoning hearing board if you didn't even have to give them the exemption in the first place? Maybe just if you want to comment on it to the Board of Commissioners, but it's adding another layer of bureaucracy, because after the zoning hearing board, that's court or whatever the case may be. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Abramson. Anyone else for public comment in the room? Jody, do we have anyone online?
There's no one online.
Okay. Thank you for delivering that with a big smile. So a couple of things here. First, Jody, do we post these things on Facebook? I know we say we do mainline times in suburban because that's what the legal requirement is.
Right.
But
No, we don't do social media. I mean, we do for our meetings, but not the specific ordinances, but, we can certainly start doing it. That's not a problem.
Well, thank you for the suggestion, and something for a public information officer to look into. So Chris, do you want to address any of the?
Yeah, I thought Mr. Abrams' comments were really good, and I think that helps to educate everyone. Reserve parking, I mentioned earlier, is a covenant that runs with this. The covenant runs with the property, so it doesn't matter if it's 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years. If the township determines that parking is required on that site due to changing conditions, the township may require the applicant to install some or part or all of that parking. So that runs with it. I think that addresses that comment. And then there is a little bit of a difference in here. We have two provisions for who can require when the parking can be installed. The first is relating to the Board of Commissioners. The Board of Commissioners is granting that approval for conditional use approval to take advantage of this incentive for transportation demand management. If the Board of Commissioners determines that the conditions of that transportation demand management are not being met, they're not being fulfilled, so for like a shuttle, right? A shuttle was one of those conditions. The shuttle's not being provided, you need to put in your parking. That's the board. The board can do that. The zoning officer looks at all of the other reserved parking in the township. There are dozens of instances of reserved parking. That's his normal duty. If something comes forward, if an institution in 1999 had reserved parking put in, now things have changed, enrollment, they need to put that parking in. That's a zoning officer's determination. Like any determination by the zoning officer, that can just be appealed to the zoning hearing.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris. So that closes the public hearing. Does anyone wish to respond to public comment?
Yeah, can I ask one comment? It may be related to that.
Actually, if you just hold for a second, let me
I can do that.
make the motion, and then we'll do comments, then we won't have to do comments.
Go ahead.
Okay.
There.
So I'm going to move that we adopt ordinance number 4246, which is Chapter 155 Zoning Code, Parking Reductions for Transportation Demand Management Plan. That's an ordinance to amend the Code of the Township of Lower Merion, Chapter 155, entitled Zoning, Article 8, Parking Standards, Section 155. 8.3, reserve parking, to add a new subsection which requires compliance with the transportation demand management policies and plan. This ordinance was authorized for advertisement at a stated meeting of the Board of Commissioners held June 15th, 2022, and duly advertised in the July 3rd, 2022 and July 10, 2022 editions of the Mainline Times and Suburban. Do I have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Bernheim. So now, Commissioner Bernheim, do you have a question?
Yeah,
or a
I
comment?
do.
Yeah.
Chris, help me out, where it starts with section 155-8.3. So it says the minimum required parking of table 8.1, minimum parking requirements above may be held as reserved parking without actually paving the spaces when authorized as a special exception. Then it goes on. If land development approval is required for the proposed improvements, including the additional parking spaces, authorization shall be by conditional use approval from the Board of Commissioners rather than by special exception. I'm having difficulty distinguishing where if land development approval is required, isn't it always going to be required, and thus isn't this always going to be conditional use as opposed to special exception? I must be missing something.
I'm trying to think of an instance. But I will say, I'm going to say no, but I'm going to ask for.
I'm not sure what my question
your
was. That it
patience,
was a yes or
but
no,
I'm
but
gonna-
feel free.
I'm gonna explain a bit, and I'll get you an example offline. It's just my brain's seizing
Okay,
up a little bit.
fine.
We've had it with institutions where there's been some instances where where reserve parking has just been able to be done as a special exception and hasn't triggered land development. Most of these, I think to your point, will eventually require land development, but there have been special instances, I think with some institutions, I'm trying to recall particularly, and I just can't get it, where there was reserve parking was put in, but it didn't trigger land development. But most of the time it's going to come to you. Now that we've reorganized the codes, pretty much everything's going to come to you through land development. I think part of this is a bit of a vestige when there had been a separation, there hadn't been that land development option. Before, previously, it had been all special exception.
All right, I'll we'll allow you to think about it, maybe you can come back because as I read this, it seemed that the exception swallowed the rules, so.
There's a little bit of legacy to how we did things in the past.
Could be. All right, okay, thank you very much. Thank you, President Sino.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. I mean, I kind of wonder if some of this is just there are existing special exception reserve parking that maybe this is referring to. But if you want to answer, we could ask Gil, but.
That's all right.
Okay, we'll get it later. Okay. Any other commissioner comments or questions? Okay. Seeing none, I guess, time for roll call vote on ordinance number 4246.
For the adoption of ordinance 4246, Mr. Bernheim.
Aye.
Mr. Churchill.
Yes.
Mr. Courtney.
Yes.
Mr. Gavin.
Yes.
Mr. Grimes.
Yes.
Ms. S. Kramer.
Yes.
Ms. G. Kramer.
Yes.
Mr. McComb. Mr. McKeon.
Yes.
Ms. O'Neill. Mr. Stevenson. Mr. Whalen.
Yes.
Mr. Zello.
Aye.
Mr. Sinai.
Yes.
The ordinance is duly adopted.
Okay, thank you, Madam Secretary. So with that, we turn to the public hearing and adoption of ordinance Chapter 135, subdivision land development, an amendment to the land development definition of the parking reserve clarification for the transportation demand management plan. This is on page 24 of your packet. I'll open the public hearing. Chris has already explained this. Do we have public comment on this proposed ordinance? In the room, no. Jody, is still no one online? Okay, so none online. I'm going to close the public hearing, and I'll move for the adoption of ordinance number 4247. There's an ordinance to amend the code of the Township of Lower Merion, Chapter 135, subdivision land development, Section 135, 2.1, definitions, to revise subsection 2.2, the definition of land development, and Section 135.8, special studies and reports, to revise Section 8.3, transportation demand management plan, paragraph B, describing when a transportation demand management plan will be required. This ordinance was authorized for advertisement at the stated meeting of the Board of Commissioners held June 15th, 2022, and duly advertised in the July 3rd, 2022 and July 10th, 2022 editions of the Mainline Times and Suburban. Do I have a second? Thank you, Vice President Caffern. Any questions for staff or comments by the Board of Commissioners, please? Okay, seeing none, Madam Secretary, please call a roll call vote on this ordinance.
For the adoption of ordinance 42.
And Commissioner O'Neill, if you could just keep your on mute until it's exactly time to calling you. Thank you.
For the adoption of ordinance 4247, Mr. Bernheim.
Aye.
Mr. Churchill.
Yes.
Mr. Courtney.
Yes.
Mr. Gavin.
Yes.
Mr. Grimes.
Yes.
Ms. S. Kramer.
Yes.
Ms. G. Kramer.
Yes.
Mr. McComb.
Yes.
Mr. McKeon.
Yes.
Ms. O'Neill.
Yes.
Mr. Stevenson.
Aye.
Mr. Whalen.
Yes.
Mr. Zello. Mr. Sinai.
Yes.
The ordinance is duly adopted.
Hey, thank you, Madam Secretary. And we now turn to the adoption of ordinance for Chapter A170 sidewalk ordinances, ordaining sidewalks at 1840, 1850, 1851 West Montgomery Avenue and 444 Claremont Avenue. It's on page 27 of your packet. And so I'm going to start by the motion. I'm going to move that we adopt ordinance number 4248, which is an ordinance to amend the code of the Township of Lower Merion, Chapter A170 sidewalk ordinances, to provide for the construction and paving of sidewalks on the east side of Montgomery Avenue, the distance of 186 feet along the frontage of 1851 West Montgomery Avenue, and on the west side of Montgomery Avenue, the distance of 544 feet along the frontage of 1840 and 1850 West Montgomery Avenue, and 444 Claremont Road, Ward 6, Township of Lower Merion, Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. This ordinance was authorized for advertisement at a special meeting of the Board of Commissioners held July 6, 2022, and duly advertised in the July 8, 2022 edition of the Times Herald. Vice President Gavin seconds. Thank you. Any questions for staff or comments by the board? Vice President Gavin.
Just a very quick comment, and I just want to thank my colleagues in advance for hopefully supporting this. This is an essential element to the opening of the new middle school to help get the children to the school safely from the surrounding neighborhoods. So thank you in advance, hopefully.
Okay. Thank you, Vice President Gavin. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none. Madam Secretary?
For the adoption of ordinance 4248, Mr. Bernheim.
Aye.
Mr. Courtney.
Yes.
Mr. Gavin.
Yes.
Mr. Grimes.
Yes.
Ms. S. Kramer.
Yes.
Ms. G. Kramer.
Yes.
Mr. McComb.
Yes.
Mr. McKeon.
Yes.
Ms. O'Neill. Aye. Mr. Stevenson.
Aye.
Mr. Whalen.
Yes.
Mr. Zello.
Aye.
Mr. Sinai.
Yes.
The ordinance is duly adopted.
Thank you, Jody. So the last ordinance for tonight is a ordinance, Chapter 145, Vehicles and Traffic, the Wyndon Avenue Parking Time Limit. It's on page 35 of your packet. I'm going to move for the adoption of ordinance number 4249, an ordinance to amend the code of the Township of Lower Merion, Chapter 145 thereof, entitled Vehicles and Traffic, Article 15, Schedules, Section 145-118, Schedule 18, Parking Time Limited, by adding an 8-hour, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., except Saturday and Sunday parking limitation on the north side of Wyndon Avenue from North Marion Avenue to North Roberts Road. This ordinance was authorized for advertisement at a special meeting of the Board of Commissioners held July 6, 2022, and duly advertised in the July 8, 2022 edition of the Times Herald. Do I have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Zelloff. Any questions for staff or comments by the board? Seeing none. Madam Secretary, will you please call for the vote?
For the adoption of ordinance 4249, Mr. Bernheim.
Aye.
Mr. Churchill. Oh, sorry. Mr. Courtney.
Yes.
Mr. Gavin.
Yes.
Mr. Grimes.
Yes.
Ms. S. Kramer.
Yes.
Ms. G. Kramer.
Yes.
Mr. McComb.
Yes.
Mr. McKeon.
Yes.
Ms. O'Neill.
Aye.
Mr. Stevenson.
Aye.
Mr. Whalen.
Yes.
Mr. Zello.
Aye.
Mr. Sinai.
Yes.
The ordinance is duly adopted.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Is there any unfinished business to come before the board? Is there any new business to come before the board? Okay, seeing none, that adjourns this evening's meeting of the Lower Merion Board of Commissioners. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I get an applause? Where's our applause from the audience?
Well done, Todd.